The Emerald Tablet of Hermes. Introduction. It is with profound pleasure that we present this modest treatise, founded upon the venerable Hermetic teachings, to the attention of students and investigators of the secret doctrines. Given the paucity of literature on this subject, despite myriad allusions to these teachings throughout occult texts, the multitude of earnest seekers of arcane truths will undoubtedly welcome the publication of this volume. The objective of this endeavor is not the promulgation of any singular philosophy or doctrine, but rather the provision of a statement of truth, one that will reconcile the disparate fragments of occult knowledge students may have acquired, which frequently appear contradictory and often serve to dishearten and alienate the novice in such studies. Our intention is not to construct a new temple of knowledge, but rather to bestow upon the student a master key, enabling him to unlock the numerous inner sanctuaries within the temple of mystery through the principal thresholds he has already crossed. No segment of the world's extant occult wisdom has been as stringently safeguarded as the fragments of the Hermetic teachings, which have descended to us across the millennia that have transpired since the era of their illustrious founder, Hermes Trismegistus. As the scribe of the gods, he resided in ancient Egypt when the current race of humanity was yet in its infancy. A contemporary of Abraham and, should the legends hold true, an instructor to that venerable sage, Hermes was and remains the great central sun of occultism, whose radiant beams have illuminated the innumerable teachings disseminated since his epoch. All foundational and essential doctrines embedded within the esoteric traditions of every race can be traced directly to Hermes. Even the most archaic traditions of India undeniably find their roots in the original Hermetic teachings. From the shores of the Ganges, numerous advanced occultists journeyed to the lands of Egypt to sit at the feet of the master. From him, they acquired the master key that elucidated and harmonized their divergent perspectives, thereby firmly establishing the secret doctrine. Learned individuals arrived from other realms as well, universally regarding Hermes as the master of masters. His influence was so profound that, despite centuries of deviations from the path by subsequent instructors across various regions, a fundamental resemblance and correspondence can still be discerned, underlying the multitudinous and often radically divergent theories currently entertained and propagated by occultists globally. The scholar of comparative religions will readily perceive the influence of the Hermetic teachings within every faith worthy of the designation known to humanity, whether it be an extinct belief system or one thriving robustly in our present era. A distinct correspondence invariably persists despite any contradictory elements, with the Hermetic teachings serving as the great reconciler. The life's work of Hermes appears to have been dedicated to sowing the great seed truth, which has since germinated and blossomed in a myriad of profound forms, rather than establishing a singular school of philosophy to dominate global intellectual discourse. Nevertheless, the primary truths he articulated have been preserved in their pristine purity by a select few in every age. These custodians, rejecting multitudes of inadequately prepared students and followers, adhered to the Hermetic tradition, reserving their wisdom solely for the minority equipped to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, this truth has been sequentially transmitted among the chosen few. In every generation and across diverse lands, a select group of initiates has unfailingly sustained the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings. These individuals have consistently remained willing to utilize their lamps to reignite the lesser luminaries of the external world whenever the light of truth has waned, obscured by neglect, and whenever the wicks have become obstructed by extraneous matter. There have always been a devoted few to faithfully tend the altar of truth, upon which the perpetual lamp of wisdom is kept perpetually ablaze. These individuals dedicated their lives to a labor of love, so eloquently articulated in the poet's lines. Oh, let not the flame die out, cherished age after age in its dark cavern, in its holy temples cherished. Fed by pure ministers of love, let not the flame die out. Such individuals have never courted popular acclaim, nor have they sought vast assemblies of followers. They remain indifferent to such superficialities, fully cognizant of the scarce minority in each generation genuinely prepared for the truth, or capable of recognizing it were it presented to them. They reserve the robust sustenance for the mature, permitting others to furnish milk for spiritual infants. They preserve their pearls of wisdom for the elect few who recognize their intrinsic worth and wear them prominently in their crowns, rather than casting them before the materialistic and vulgar swine, who would merely trample them into the mire and amalgamate them with their repulsive intellectual fodder. Yet, these custodians have never neglected nor overlooked the original tenets of Hermes concerning the transmission of truthful discourse to those prepared to receive it. This principle is articulated in the Kybalion thusly: where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those ready for his teaching open wide. And furthermore, when the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. However, their customary demeanor has unfailingly aligned with another hermetic aphorism, likewise found within the Kybalion: the lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. There are detractors who have criticized this disposition of the Hermetists, contending that their policy of seclusion and reticence failed to manifest a proper spiritual generosity. Yet, a momentary retrospective glance across the annals of history affirms the profound wisdom of the masters. They recognized the inherent folly of attempting to bestow upon the world teachings it was neither prepared nor willing to assimilate. The Hermetists have never aspired to martyrdom. Instead, they have sat silently apart, bearing a pitying smile upon their closed lips, while the heathens raged tumultuously around them. Such throngs engaged in their customary diversions of torturing and executing those sincere, albeit misguided, enthusiasts who harbored the illusion that they could force upon a barbarous race truths comprehensible only to the elect who had significantly advanced along the path. Moreover, the animus of persecution has not yet been entirely extinguished from the earth. There remain specific hermetic teachings which, were they publicly promulgated, would invite an immense clamor of scorn and vituperation from the multitudes, who would inevitably raise the cry anew, "Crucify! Crucify!" Within this concise volume, we have endeavored to elucidate the fundamental tenets of the Kybalion. We strive to provide you with the operational principles, leaving you the task of their application, rather than attempting to delineate the teachings in exhaustive detail. If you are a genuine student, you will possess the capacity to interpret and apply these principles. If not, you must cultivate yourself into such an individual, for otherwise, the Hermetic teachings will amount to mere words to you. The Three Initiates. Chapter 1. The Hermetic Philosophy. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. The Kybalion. From ancient Egypt have emerged the foundational esoteric and occult doctrines that have profoundly shaped the philosophies of all races, nations, and peoples for several millennia. Egypt, the venerated home of the pyramids and the Sphinx, stood as the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. From her secret doctrine, all nations have unequivocally borrowed. India, Persia, Chaldea, Media, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece and Rome, alongside myriad other civilizations of antiquity, partook liberally at the grand feast of knowledge. This intellectual bounty was graciously provided by the hierophants and masters of the land of Isis for all who arrived prepared to imbibe the vast reservoir of mystic and occult lore amassed by the masterminds of that ancient realm. It was within ancient Egypt that there resided the great adepts and masters, whose brilliance has never been surpassed, and rarely equaled, throughout the centuries that have taken their processional flight since the era of the great Hermes. Within Egypt lay the great lodge of lodges of the mystics. Through the portals of her temples passed the neophytes who subsequently, as hierophants, adepts, and masters, journeyed to the four corners of the earth, carrying with them the invaluable knowledge they were prepared, eager, and willing to impart to those sufficiently evolved to receive it. All scholars of the occult acknowledge the profound debt owed to these venerable masters of that antiquated land. But among these exalted masters of ancient Egypt there once resided one whom the masters themselves acclaimed as the Master of Masters. This entity, if indeed he was merely a man, dwelt in Egypt during its most primordial epochs. He was known as Hermes Trismegistus. He stood as the father of the occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of alchemy. The precise details of his biographical history have been lost to the passage of time, owing to the lapse of the years, although several ancient nations fiercely disputed one another's claims to the honor of having served as his birthplace, and this thousands of years ago. The exact date of his sojourn in Egypt, during that, his final incarnation upon this planet, remains presently unknown, yet it has been situated within the nascent days of Egypt's oldest dynasties, long before the advent of Moses. The foremost authorities regard him as a contemporary of Abraham, and certain Jewish traditions go so far as to assert that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystical knowledge directly from Hermes himself. As the years progressed following his departure from this plane of existence, the Egyptians deified Hermes, elevating him to their pantheon under the name of Thoth. In subsequent eras, the denizens of ancient Greece likewise embraced him as one of their deities, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians venerated his memory for many centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of the gods, and bestowing upon him, distinctively, his ancient title Trismegistus, which signifies the thrice great, the great, the greatest great, etc. In all the ancient lands, the name of Hermes Trismegistus was held in the highest reverence, the appellation being synonymous with the very fount of wisdom. Even to this day we employ the term hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape, etc., and this arises from the fact that the followers of Hermes invariably observed the principle of strict secrecy regarding their teachings. They eschewed the practice of casting pearls before swine, adhering instead to the doctrine of providing milk for babes, meat for strong men, both of which maxims are undoubtedly familiar to readers of the Christian scriptures, yet both of which had been utilized by the Egyptians for centuries prior to the Christian era. And this policy of the judicious dissemination of truth has consistently characterized the hermeticists, persisting even unto the present day. The hermetic teachings may be discovered in all lands, among all religions, but are never exclusively identified with any single nation, nor with any particular religious sect. This stems from the admonition of the ancient teachers, who warned against permitting the secret doctrine to crystallize into a rigid creed. The profound wisdom of this caution is readily apparent to all students of history. The ancient occultism of India and Persia degenerated, and was largely lost, owing to the fact that the teachers assumed the role of priests and thus conflated theology with philosophy, the result being that the occultism of India and Persia has been gradually obscured amidst a multitude of religious superstitions, cults, creeds, and gods. Thus it was with ancient Greece and Rome. Thus it was with the hermetic teachings of the Gnostics and the early Christians, which were lost during the reign of Constantine, whose iron hand smothered philosophy beneath the heavy blanket of theology, thereby depriving the Christian Church of that which was its very essence and spirit, and causing it to grope blindly throughout several centuries before finding the path back to its ancient faith. The indications apparent to all discerning observers in this 20th century being that the Church is presently striving to reclaim its ancient mystical teachings. But there were always a few faithful souls who kept the flame alive, tending it with meticulous care, and refusing to allow its light to become extinguished. And thanks to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, the truth remains with us today. However, it is not to be found within books to any significant extent. It has been transmitted from master to student, from initiate to hierophant, from lip to ear. On the rare occasions it was committed to writing at all, its meaning was deliberately veiled in the terminology of alchemy and astrology, ensuring that only those possessing the key could decipher it correctly. This obfuscation was necessitated in order to evade the persecutions of the medieval theologians, who combated the secret doctrine with fire and sword, stake, gibbet, and cross. Even to this day there will be found but few reliable treatises on the Hermetic philosophy, despite the fact that there are countless references to it dispersed throughout numerous volumes addressing various facets of occultism. And yet, the Hermetic philosophy remains the singular master key which will open all the doors to the occult teachings. In antiquity, there existed a compilation of specific basic Hermetic doctrines, transmitted from teacher to student, which was known as the Kybalion, the precise significance and meaning of the term having been lost for several centuries. This body of teaching, however, remains known to the many unto whom it has descended, passed from mouth to ear, continuously on and on throughout the centuries. Its precepts have never been documented or printed, insofar as we are aware. It constituted merely a collection of maxims, axioms, and precepts, which were incomprehensible to the uninitiated, but which were readily understood by dedicated students, once the axioms, maxims, and precepts had been elucidated and exemplified by the Hermetic initiates to their neophytes. These teachings truly constituted the foundational principles of the art of Hermetic alchemy, which, contrary to popular belief, pertained to the mastery of mental forces, rather than material elements, the transmutation of one variety of mental vibrations into others, instead of the changing of one base metal into another. The legends surrounding the philosopher's stone, which purported to turn base metal into gold, served as allegories relating to the Hermetic philosophy, readily comprehended by all scholars of true Hermeticism. In this modest volume, of which this constitutes the first lesson, we invite our students to examine into the Hermetic teachings, as set forth in the Kybalion, and as elucidated by ourselves, humble students of these teachings, who, despite bearing the title of initiates, remain perpetual students at the feet of Hermes, the Master. We herein present to you many of the maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion, accompanied by such explanations and illustrations as we deem likely to render the doctrines more easily comprehensible to the modern student, particularly given that the original text is intentionally veiled in obscure terminology. The original maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion are printed herein, enclosed within quotation marks, the proper credit being duly given. Our original contributions are printed in the standard manner, within the main body of the work. We trust that the multitudes of students to whom we now offer this brief treatise will derive as much profound benefit from the study of its pages as have the many who have preceded them, treading the same path to mastery throughout the centuries that have elapsed since the era of Hermes Trismegistus, the master of masters, or the great. In the words of the Kybalion, where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those ready for his teaching open wide. The Kybalion. When the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. The Kybalion. Consequently, in accordance with the teachings, the transmission of this book to those ready for instruction will attract the attention of such individuals as are prepared to receive the teaching. And, by the same token, when the pupil is suitably prepared to receive the truth, this modest volume will invariably present itself to him or her. Such is the law. The hermetic principle of cause and effect, operating through its aspect as the law of attraction, shall draw lips and ear together, uniting pupil and book in harmonious company. So mote it be. Chapter 2. The 7 Hermetic Principles. The principles of truth are 7. He who possesses an acute understanding of these holds the magic key, before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The Kybalion. The 7 Hermetic Principles, which serve as the foundation for the entirety of Hermetic philosophy, are as follows. The principle of mentalism. The principle of correspondence, the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity, the principle of rhythm, the principle of cause and effect, the principle of gender. These 7 principles shall be thoroughly discussed and elucidated as we advance through these lessons. Nevertheless, a brief exposition of each may appropriately be provided at this juncture. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. The Kybalion. This principle encapsulates the fundamental truth that all is mind. It postulates that the all is spirit, a prevailing essence that is inherently unknowable and undefinable, yet may be conceived and conceptualized as a universal, infinite, and living mind. Furthermore, it clarifies that the entirety of the phenomenal world, or the universe, is merely a mental creation of the all, beholden to the laws governing created things. It asserts that the universe, both in its totality and within its constituent parts or units, exists solely within the mind of the all, in which mind we live, move, and possess our being. By establishing the mental nature of the universe, this principle effortlessly accounts for the diverse mental and psychic phenomena that so prominently capture public attention. Phenomena which, devoid of such illumination, remain incomprehensible and fiercely resistant to scientific analysis. A profound understanding of this paramount hermetic principle of mentalism permits the individual to readily comprehend the laws of the mental universe, thereby applying them to foster personal well-being and advancement. Consequently, the Hermetic student is empowered to utilize the great mental laws with discerning intelligence, rather than employing them in a haphazard fashion. Holding the master key, the student may unlock the myriad doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge, entering therein with freedom and sagacity. This principle elucidates the true nature of energy, power, and matter, revealing precisely why and how these elements are fundamentally subordinate to the mastery of mind. As one of the venerable Hermetic masters recorded in ages long past, he who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced upon the path to mastery. And these words resonate with as much veracity today as they did upon their initial inscription. Bereft of this master key, mastery remains an absolute impossibility, and the student shall knock in vain upon the multitudinous doors of the temple. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the intrinsic truth that there invariably exists a correspondence between the laws and phenomena pertaining to the various planes of being and life. The ancient Hermetic axiom was articulated thus: as above, so below, as below, so above. To master this principle is to acquire the means of unraveling many an obscure paradox and unearthing the hidden secrets of nature. Although there exist planes beyond our immediate comprehension, the application of the principle of correspondence to them enables us to understand much that would otherwise remain wholly unknowable. This principle enjoys universal application and manifestation across the diverse planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It stands as an immutable universal law. The ancient Hermetists regarded this principle as one of the most paramount mental instruments at humanity's disposal, utilizing it to pry aside the impediments that obscured the unknown from view. Its application effectively parted the veil of Isis, affording one a fleeting glimpse of the goddess's visage. Much as a mastery of the principles of geometry allows an astronomer to measure distant suns and their orbital movements while seated in an observatory, so too does a profound knowledge of the principle of correspondence empower man to reason intelligently from the known into the realm of the unknown. By studying the monad, he comes to understand the archangel. The principle of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. The Kybalion. This principle encapsulates the profound truth that everything is in perpetual motion. Everything vibrates, and nothing is at absolute rest. Facts that modern science unequivocally endorses, and which each subsequent scientific discovery consistently serves to verify. Yet, remarkably, this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the revered masters of ancient Egypt. This principle clarifies that the distinctions among the manifold manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit are primarily the result of varying rates of vibration. From the all, which embodies pure spirit, down to the grossest formations of matter, everything is engaged in vibration. The more elevated the vibration, the higher its corresponding position upon the scale. The vibration of spirit occurs at an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity, rendering it practically at rest, much in the manner that a rapidly spinning wheel may appear entirely motionless. Conversely, at the opposing end of the spectrum, there exist gross forms of matter whose vibrations are of such a low frequency that they, too, appear to be perfectly at rest. Between these two poles, there unfold millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration. From the corpuscle and the electron, through the atom and the molecule, and extending to entire worlds and universes, everything exists in a state of vibratory motion. This remains equally true across the planes of energy and force, the mental planes, and even extending unto the spiritual planes. An astute comprehension of this principle, coupled with the appropriate formulas, empowers Hermetic students to exercise control over their own mental vibrations, as well as the vibrations of those around them. Furthermore, the masters apply this principle in myriad ways to achieve mastery over natural phenomena. He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, proclaims one of the ancient writers. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The Kybalion. This principle encompasses the truth that everything is dual. Everything possesses two poles. Everything features its pair of opposites, all of which constitute venerated hermetic axioms. It resolves the ancient paradoxes that have perplexed so countless many, which have traditionally been articulated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing merely in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't simultaneously. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half-false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It posits that within everything there exist two poles, or opposing aspects, and that these opposites are, in reality, merely the two extremes of the identical phenomenon, separated by a multitude of varying degrees. To illustrate, heat and cold, despite appearing as opposites, are intrinsically the exact same thing. The perceived differences consist solely of varying degrees along the same continuum. Observe a thermometer and attempt to discern precisely where heat terminates and cold commences. There exists no such phenomenon as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply denote varying degrees of the same foundational essence, and that very essence, which manifests as both heat and cold, is merely a specific form, variety, and rate of vibration. Thus, heat and cold are incontrovertibly the two poles of that which we designate as heat, and the phenomena attendant thereupon are distinct manifestations of the principle of polarity. This identical principle is manifested in the case of light and darkness, which are essentially the same entity, the difference consisting entirely of varying degrees situated between the two poles of the phenomena. Where does darkness recede and light begin? What constitutes the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity elucidates these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. This very principle operates equally upon the mental plane. Let us consider a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate, two mental states that are ostensibly entirely distinct. Nevertheless, there exist degrees of hate and degrees of love, alongside a midpoint where we employ the terms like or dislike. These shade into one another so gradually that, upon occasion, we are at a loss to determine whether we like, dislike, or feel neither. All are fundamentally degrees of the identical phenomenon, as will become evident upon a moment's reflection. Furthermore, it is entirely possible to transmute the vibrations of hate into the vibrations of love, both within one's own mind and within the minds of others. Many who read these words have undoubtedly endured personal experiences regarding the involuntary and rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse, whether within themselves or in those around them. Consequently, one must recognize the potential for this to be accomplished deliberately through the exercise of the will, utilizing hermetic formulas. Good and evil are merely the opposite poles of the same entity, and the hermetist comprehends the art of transmuting evil into good through the meticulous application of the principle of polarity. In essence, the art of polarization constitutes a phase of mental alchemy, recognized and practiced by both ancient and modern hermetic masters. A profound understanding of this principle will empower an individual to alter their own polarity, as well as that of others, provided they devote the requisite time and study to master the discipline. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything possesses its tides. All things rise and fall. The swing of the pendulum manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the profound truth that within everything, there manifests a measured motion to and fro, an outflow and an inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like oscillation, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide, occurring between the two poles that exist in strict accordance with the previously delineated principle of polarity. There is invariably an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This manifests within the grand affairs of the universe. In suns, worlds, humanity, beasts, mind, energy, and matter. This immutable law is evident in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life cycles of all things, and ultimately in the mental states of man. The Hermetists have firmly grasped this principle, recognizing its universal application, and have concurrently discovered specific means to transcend its effects upon themselves through the employment of appropriate formulas and methodologies. They implement the mental law of neutralization. While they cannot annul the principle entirely, nor compel it to cease its operation, they have acquired the knowledge to evade its influences upon themselves to a specific degree, commensurate with their mastery of the principle. They have learned how to employ it, rather than being subjugated by it. The art of the Hermetists consists inherently in this and analogous methods. The master of hermetics polarizes himself at the precise point where he desires to remain, and subsequently neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum that would otherwise threaten to carry him toward the opposing pole. All individuals who have attained any measure of self-mastery accomplish this to some extent, often unconsciously. However, the master executes this consciously, through the sovereign use of his will. In doing so, he attains a degree of poise and mental firmness that borders on the unbelievable for the masses, who are perpetually swung backward and forward like a pendulum. Both this principle and the principle of polarity have been scrutinized rigorously by the Hermetists, and the techniques for counteracting, neutralizing, and utilizing them constitute a paramount component of Hermetic mental alchemy. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything occurs in accordance with law. Chance is merely a name for law that remains unrecognized. There exist many planes of causation, yet nothing ultimately escapes the law. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the fundamental fact that there is a cause for every effect, and an effect arising from every cause. It elucidates that everything transpires according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there is absolutely no such entity as chance, and that while there exist various planes of cause and effect, with the higher planes dominating the lower, nothing ever entirely circumvents the law. The Hermetists comprehend the art and the methods of elevating themselves above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a significant degree. By ascending mentally to a superior plane, they become causers rather than mere effects. The masses are swept along, eternally obedient to their environment, to the wills and desires of those more formidable than themselves, to heredity, to suggestion, and to myriad other external forces that maneuver them like pawns upon the grand chessboard of life. Conversely, the masters, ascending to the plane above, assert dominion over their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the very environment that surrounds them, thereby becoming the movers rather than the pawns. They actively participate in playing the game of life, rather than being played and indiscriminately moved about by external wills and environments. They wield the principle, refusing to be its subjugated tools. The masters faithfully obey the causation of the higher planes, yet they actively reign upon their own plane. Within this assertion is condensed an extraordinary wealth of hermetic knowledge. Let him read who possesses the capacity to comprehend. The principle of gender. Gender is intrinsic to everything. Everything possesses its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests across all planes. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the inviolable truth that gender is manifested in everything. The masculine and feminine principles are perpetually at work. This holds true not solely upon the physical plane, but equally upon the mental and even the spiritual planes. Upon the physical plane, this principle manifests as sex. Upon the higher planes, it assumes more elevated forms, yet the principle remains eternally the same. No creation, whether physical, mental, or spiritual, is remotely possible without the operation of this principle. A profound comprehension of its laws will illuminate many a subject that has long perplexed the minds of humanity. The principle of gender operates continually in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything, and indeed every person, inherently contains these two elements or principles within itself, himself or herself. Every male entity possesses the female element as well. Every female equally contains the male principle. Should you wish to comprehend the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must diligently study and understand this hermetic principle. It harbors the absolute solution to a multitude of life's profoundest mysteries. We solemnly caution you that this principle holds no correlation whatsoever with the numerous base, pernicious, and degrading theories, teachings, and lustful practices that are currently disseminated under fanciful titles, and which constitute a grievous prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such vile revivals of the ancient and infamous forms of phallicism inevitably tend toward the ruin of mind, body, and soul. The Hermetic philosophy has invariably sounded a warning note against these degraded doctrines, which invariably lean toward lust, licentiousness, and the severe perversion of nature's purest principles. If you seek such salacious teachings, you must look elsewhere for them. Hermeticism offers absolutely nothing for you along those lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. Chapter 3. Mental Transmutation. Mind may be transmuted, from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True hermetic transmutation is inherently a mental art. The Kybalion. As we have previously articulated, the Hermetists were the original alchemists, astrologers, and psychologists, with Hermes himself having been the esteemed founder of these enduring schools of thought. From astrology has emerged modern astronomy. From alchemy has developed modern chemistry, and from mystic psychology has blossomed the modern psychology taught within contemporary academic institutions. Yet, it must never be supposed that the ancients were ignorant of those profound truths which modern schools presently presume to be their own exclusive and special property. The records engraved upon the stones of ancient Egypt demonstrate conclusively that the ancients possessed a fully comprehensive knowledge of astronomy. The very construction of the pyramids illustrates the profound connection between their architectural design and the study of astronomical science. Nor were they ignorant of chemistry, for fragments of ancient writings reveal their intimate acquaintance with the chemical properties of substances. Indeed, antiquity's theories regarding physics are gradually being corroborated by the latest discoveries of modern science, particularly those concerning the constitution of matter. Nor must it be assumed that they were unaware of the so-called modern discoveries in psychology. On the contrary, the Egyptians were exceptionally skilled in the psychological sciences, particularly in those branches that contemporary schools neglect, yet which are currently being unearthed under the guise of psychic science. This emerging field is perplexing modern psychologists, compelling them reluctantly to concede that there may, after all, be validity to such phenomena. The truth is that, beneath material chemistry, astronomy, and psychology, the ancients possessed a profound knowledge of transcendental astronomy, known as astrology, of transcendental chemistry, known as alchemy, and of transcendental psychology, known as mystic psychology. They commanded both the inner knowledge and the outer knowledge, whereas the latter alone is grasped by modern scientists. Among the myriad secret branches of knowledge held by the Hermetists was that known as mental transmutation, which constitutes the subject matter of this lesson. Transmutation is a term customarily employed to designate the ancient art of transmuting metals, specifically, the conversion of base metals into gold. The word transmute signifies the act of changing from one nature, form, or substance into another, to transform entirely. Accordingly, mental transmutation refers to the art of changing and transforming mental states, forms, and conditions into others. Thus, one may perceive that mental transmutation is the art of mental chemistry, should one prefer the term, a manifestation of practical mystic psychology. Yet, this implies far more than what appears upon the surface. Transmutation, alchemy, or chemistry upon the mental plane is undeniably significant in its effects, and were the art to culminate there, it would remain one of the most vital branches of study known to humanity. However, this is merely the beginning. Let us examine why. The first of the 7 Hermetic principles is the principle of mentalism, the axiom of which states that the all is mind, the universe is mental. This signifies that the underlying reality of the universe is mind, and that the universe itself is mental, that is, existing within the mind of the all. We shall consider this principle in succeeding lessons, but let us first examine the effect of this principle if it is assumed to be true. If the universal is inherently mental in its nature, then mental transmutation must be the art of altering the conditions of the universe, specifically along the lines of matter, force, and mind. Therefore, it becomes evident that mental transmutation is truly the magic of which ancient writers spoke so extensively in their mystical treatises, yet about which they provided so few practical instructions. If all is indeed mental, then the art that enables one to transmute mental conditions must inevitably render the master a controller of material conditions, as well as those ordinarily classified as mental. As a matter of fact, none but advanced mental alchemists have ever attained the degree of power requisite to control the grosser physical conditions, such as mastering the elements of nature, summoning or quelling tempests, or instigating and ceasing earthquakes and other monumental physical phenomena. Nevertheless, the conviction that such men have existed, and continue to exist today, remains a matter of earnest belief among advanced occultists of all schools. That the masters exist, and possess these powers, the foremost teachers assure their students, having themselves had experiences that entirely justify such beliefs and assertions. These masters abstain from public exhibitions of their powers. Instead, they seek seclusion from the multitudes in order to advance better along the path of attainment. We mention their existence at this juncture solely to draw your attention to the fact that their power is entirely mental, operating along the lines of higher mental transmutation under the hermetic principle of mentalism. The universe is mental, the Kybalion. However, students and hermetists of a lesser degree than the masters, namely the initiates and teachers, are able to operate freely upon the mental plane through mental transmutation. In truth, all that we term psychic phenomena, mental influence, mental science, new thought phenomena, and the like operates along these same general lines. For there is but a single underlying principle involved, regardless of the nomenclature applied to the phenomena. The student and practitioner of mental transmutation labors upon the mental plane, transmuting mental conditions, states, and the like into others in accordance with various formulas that are more or less efficacious. The diverse treatments, affirmations, denials, and so forth employed by the schools of mental science are merely formulas, often quite imperfect and unscientific, of the hermetic art. The majority of modern practitioners remain remarkably ignorant when compared to the ancient masters, for they lack the fundamental knowledge upon which this great work is predicated. Not only may one's own mental states and conditions be altered or transmuted through hermetic methods, but the states of others may also be, and indeed are, constantly transmuted in the exact same manner. This frequently occurs unconsciously, yet it is often executed consciously by those who comprehend the governing laws and principles, particularly when the individuals thus affected remain uninformed regarding the principles of self-protection. Furthermore, as numerous students and practitioners of modern mental science are aware, any material condition contingent upon the minds of others may be altered or transmuted in accordance with the earnest desire, focused will, and deliberate treatments of the person desiring altered conditions of life. The public is currently so widely informed regarding such matters that we do not deem it necessary to expound upon them at length. Our purpose at this juncture is merely to illuminate the hermetic principle and art that underlie all these diverse forms of practice, whether they be for good or for evil, for this force may be directed toward opposite ends, in accordance with the hermetic principles of polarity. In this modest volume, we shall articulate the foundational tenets of mental transmutation, so that all who read may grasp the underlying principles, thereby possessing the master key capable of unlocking the myriad doors of the principle of polarity. We shall now proceed to examine the first of the 7 hermetic principles, the principle of mentalism, which elucidates the profound truth that the all is mind, the universe is mental, as expressed in the words of the Kybalion. We request the close attention and meticulous study of this monumental principle on the part of our students, for it serves as the truly basic principle of the entire hermetic philosophy, as well as the hermetic art of mental transmutation. Chapter 4. The All. Beneath and behind the universe of time, space, and change, there is ever to be found the substantial reality, the fundamental truth. The Kybalion. Substance means that which underlies all outward manifestations, the essence, the essential reality, the thing in itself, and so forth. Substantial means actually existing, being the essential element, being real, and the like. Reality means the state of being real, true, enduring, valid, fixed, permanent, actual, and so forth. Beneath and behind all outward appearances or manifestations, there must invariably exist a substantial reality. This is the law. Man, in considering the universe of which he is a unit, perceives nothing but continuous change in matter, forces, and mental states. He observes that nothing truly is, but that everything is perpetually becoming and changing. Nothing remains stationary. Everything is in a state of being born, developing, and perishing. The precise moment an entity achieves its zenith, its decline commences. The law of rhythm operates ceaselessly. There exists no absolute reality, enduring quality, fixity, or substantiality in any finite thing. Nothing is permanent except change itself. He perceives all entities evolving from other forms and resolving into yet others, a perpetual cycle of action and reaction, of inflow and outflow, of construction and dissolution, of creation and destruction, of birth, maturation, and death. Nothing endures save change. Furthermore, should he be a contemplative individual, he recognizes that all of these mutable phenomena must be mere outward appearances or manifestations of some underlying power, some substantial reality. Thinkers across all nations and eras have acknowledged the necessity of postulating the existence of this substantial reality. Every philosophy worthy of the designation has been founded upon this fundamental premise. Humanity has bestowed many names upon this substantial reality. Some have identified it as deity. Others have termed it the infinite and eternal energy. Still others have attempted to classify it as matter. Yet all have conceded its existence. It is self-evident. It requires no further argumentation. In these discourses, we have followed the example of some of the world's most eminent thinkers, both ancient and modern, the Hermetic masters, and have designated this underlying power, this substantial reality, by the Hermetic appellation of the All, a term we consider the most comprehensive among the myriad titles applied by humanity to that which transcends names and terminology. We embrace and impart the perspective of the great Hermetic philosophers throughout history, as well as that of those illumined souls who have ascended to higher planes of existence, both of whom assert that the intrinsic nature of the All is entirely unknowable. This must inevitably be the case, for naught but the All itself is capable of comprehending its own nature and being. The Hermetists maintain and teach that the All, in and of itself, is and must forever remain unknowable. They regard all the theories, conjectures, and speculations of theologians and metaphysicians concerning the inner nature of the All as mere childish endeavors by mortal minds to apprehend the secret of the infinite. Such endeavors have perpetually failed and shall always fail, owing to the very nature of the undertaking. An individual pursuing such inquiries wanders endlessly within the labyrinth of thought, until he is alienated from all sane reasoning, action, or conduct, becoming utterly unfitted for the practical duties of life. He resembles the squirrel that frantically sprints in perpetual circles upon the treadmill wheel of its cage, journeying incessantly yet arriving nowhere, remaining a prisoner in the end, and standing precisely where it began. Even more presumptuous are those who attempt to ascribe to the All the personality, qualities, properties, characteristics, and attributes of themselves, projecting upon the All human emotions, feelings, and traits, even descending to the pettiest qualities of mankind, such as jealousy, susceptibility to flattery and praise, a desire for offerings and worship, and all other remnants from the childhood era of the human race. Such notions are unworthy of mature individuals, and they are rapidly being discarded. However, while the essential nature of the All remains unknowable, there exist certain truths connected to its existence that the human intellect finds itself compelled to accept. The examination of these insights constitutes a proper subject of inquiry, particularly as they harmonize with the revelations of the illumined upon higher planes. It is to this inquiry that we now invite you. That which constitutes the fundamental truth, the substantial reality, is beyond accurate naming, but the wise identify it as the All. The Kybalion. In its essence, the all is inherently unknowable. The Kybalion. Nevertheless, the dictates of reason must be hospitably received and treated with profound respect. The Kybalion. Human reason, whose... Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.